Welcome to Booked, where two guys tell you about the books they're reading. I'm Rob Olson.
And I'm Olivia Snedden. I know I said that the next thing you'd be hearing is our weird holiday beach episode. That some things have occurred since then. And one of those things is the episode that you are listening to right now. In just a moment, we're going to be bringing on David Duchovny, whose book Miss Subways we reviewed just a couple of months ago, and we're going to have some questions for David Duchovny.
Yeah, I've got like a million things I'd like to say about talking to David Duchovny, but I'm pretty sure that you just want to get right to it. So without further ado, here is our conversation with David Duchovny.
David, thanks for reaching out to us. It's great to have you on.
It's my pleasure, and I was happy to discover your podcast just by accident. I have to say, I'm not a big podcast guy, so I just stumbled on it and I listened to it. And I was like, these guys sound like they're pretty fair and open-minded.
I can't tell you how relieved I am that you said that. So I think, and even in the interview the review episode, we kind of touched on the fact that obviously we didn't really know you as much from writing as other things, but in an interview that I saw or heard, you talked about how your father published his novel when he was in his early 70s. So it kind of struck me as like, we know that you have an education in literature, and cut to a while later, your first novel comes out. So have you always kind of been a writer, or is that something that you feel like I finally became a writer now that these books are out?
Well, let me just say that my favorite part of your podcast when I listened to it was where you played some of the music, and you were very skeptically queued it up, and then you were like, that's not terrible. I might listen to that someday. That was my favorite part. But I think that I would have always identified myself as a writer, I think, from a young age, probably because my father identified himself as a writer, even though he hadn't published a novel until 72. He did write a play that was on Broadway in 1967 called The Trial of Lee Harvey Oswald, and it was the cliched too soon. It was 4 years after the assassination, and people weren't ready to see a play about the trial of a man who, Oswald, who had been killed and held responsible for it. And so that was a huge disaster. And he wrote like little political satire books, like The Wisdom of Spiro T. Agnew. He would collate quotes very much that were in opposition to one another and expose these establishment figures as fools. Like he had a book called The Establishment Dictionary, which was fake definitions of words in the establishment, like an Agnew to Agnew, and he'd make something up using phony Latin derivations and things like that. So he wrote a lot of little stuff, but he never wrote a sustained work of fiction, and I didn't think he ever would. And then at the age of 72, which was 3 years before he died, he did publish a novel called Coney that was very well reviewed in the New York Times. So it was kind of a wonderful example of either persistence or delusion on his part, and it was just a great example to me as a person, as a son, that he would have actually been telling the truth all those years, that he was actually a writer. So yeah, I would have always identified myself as going into my father's business in a way. I didn't know what else I was going to do with my life, so I thought, well, I should know how to write. My father's father was a newspaper man. He worked for the Yiddish newspaper in New York called the Daily Forward. It was the oldest and the only Yiddish language newspaper in America. It's no longer, but he was, I think, a theater reporter in that, and like a jack of all trades reporter. So his father had been a writer of sorts, and I think as immigrants, as Jewish immigrants, the word is very important. The ability to write is extremely important. If you're not allowed to own land, if you're not allowed to own possessions and things like that. These are people of the book. And so it comes from that side, also from my mother's side. She's Scottish, also no money, peasantry, education extremely important. Education being the way out of their way of life. So from both sides, I got that being in school was very important, and that education was of supreme importance, and that writing was the true mark of a thinking individual.
Indeed.
We done?
Your books.
Done. I think that was it. I should just drop the fucking mic and take off.
Wait, so I want to know the establishment thing you're talking about your father was doing, the definitions and stuff.
Yeah.
Is that something that's available commercially?
It might be. I have a copy of it. It's the books that he wrote. The publisher was named Ballantine. Don't ask me why. I remember Ballantine Books. The Establishment Dictionary is one book. The Wisdom of Spiro T. Agnew is another book. On with the Wind, a biography of Martha Mitchell, who was the the United States District Attorney General wife. Remember Martha Mitchell during the Nixon administration? I guess she was known for spouting off, so he collected a bunch of her quotes. He also wrote a book called The Psychiatrist's Coloring Book, and the Nikita Khrushchev Coloring Book, which probably sound funnier than they actually were. And he also wrote a biography of David Ben-Gurion. He sounds like a really interesting cat now that I'm talking about him.
I was going to say, this sounds like super witty and like cheeky fun.
Yeah, he was maybe a little ahead of his time. He would have loved and hated Trump. You know, like now it's everybody's game to go after Trump in these ways. But I think he was a satirist at heart. He was a parodist and a satirist, and he had a good sense of humor.
Wow.
Yeah, it struck me while you were saying that he was ahead of his time and probably would have done very well in today's political climate with that type of writing. You mentioned satire. So we subsequently, since we've set up this interview, we're able to read Holy Cow and Bucky fucking Dent. So we are all caught up on the David Duchovny library. And it struck us that Holy Cow was satire and funny. Bucky fucking Dent, to me, felt a lot more like a literary piece. And then Miss Subways was kind of a great marriage. I think that it was part funny, but it was also part mysticism and part literary. If you were to describe yourself, and I know how labels suck, but if you were trying very quickly to explain to somebody like who your contemporaries are in literature, where would you classify yourself as a writer?
Well, labels are good in the kitchen, because it's good to know where the silverware is, and it's good to know where the microwave is. So I think those are good. But where would I put myself? I'm probably, I think I'm also a sentimental writer. I think I'm a nostalgic writer. I think partly because of my education, I'm probably a literary writer. I can't escape the fact that I know or that I've been exposed to, the best writings that humankind has offered up, and that I can't forget it. So I'm kind of enthralled to it, and I have to join in the conversation. So when I'm writing, I guess I'm very aware of who I'm writing with, and the quotes that are rattling around in my mind, and the books that are rattling around in my mind, and I'm engaged in that dialogue with. I guess with the canon is what they used to call it, or I want to engage with it. I mean, it's very important to me. Starting with the Bible, and then with the Greeks, with the Bible, and with Western literature. So but also I also think I'm probably I seek out what's funny. I tend to even in my work as an actor, I tend to try to find the funny bone of the character, wherever that is, and I've never really played a character without one, and that may be a fault of mine, but to me, it's a real, it's a baseline for finding a character, is what that character thinks is funny, because I feel like people are really most themselves at those points when you see what they're laughing at, or you see what kind of jokes they tell. but that's kind of off the subject of what you asked, but maybe not. I don't know.
No, I think it fits into it pretty well. Olivia, when we were reviewing Miss Subways, talked about how, and it was we had a little dance around how to describe it, because I said it was
Right.
your book was easy to read, and he corrected me to saying approachable. But I think that, like, that thing that you're talking about, finding the funny bone of the characters and stuff, and just, like, I don't want to say vulnerability, but kind of exposing, like, the humanity of a character, as long as they're human, I guess, because there are cows.
Right.
I think makes your writing very approachable. It makes it so that it's like, we're kind of getting on the same level. It's easy to understand and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's what you meant by that, but that I just thought about that as you were saying that, is like, I think a lot of the approachability of your book is the fact that you're almost kind of like winking at the reader in spots as you're writing the story.
Which story? All of them,
All of them.
or the Holy Cow?
Well, maybe less Bucky fucking
I
dead,
mean,
because that seemed a little more serious, but there's still that comedy in there. There's humor threaded throughout the whole thing.
Oh well, yeah. To me, Bucky Dent is funny a lot of places. To me, I laugh. I think I probably laugh the most if I was to read Bucky Dent of the things that I've done. But those are the parrots of Malibu. There are parrots in Malibu, wild parrots in there. I'm not making that noise if you hear it. Those are birds. Do you hear it?
I'll tell you what. Last summer I spent in Santa Clara Valley, and
Yeah, parrots.
I was plagued by these, like, wild parrots. There was, like, little flocks of them. These little green parrots, right?
Yeah, they're really loud. Yeah, I love them.
They don't have a good sound.
No, they don't. But I just love that they exist. They shouldn't.
It's charming, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I don't know. I mean, it's probably a fault. I can't help but look for the funny of things or situations, and maybe it's a defense mechanism. Maybe it's a way that I'm not going as deeply as I could go. But I also believe that the funniest people that I've known in my life are actually the deepest people. So I guess I'm torn. With thinking, with feeling like, oh, my instinct is to go funny here. Maybe I shouldn't follow that instinct because maybe I'm trying to cover something up. So I kind of have that battle as an actor, as a writer, as anything, as a person.
I can feel that. I've always kind of had that feeling that, like, I guess if you want to talk about acting or whatever, like, the people who, or in general, the people that can do comedy, which I think is incredibly difficult, they can kind of, they can access, like, the entire spectrum of emotions as well.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, if you can get somebody laughing, and crying at the same time, to me, that's the height of, like, art. Like you're having them experience, like, both the North and South Pole of what it is to be human in one moment. It's like, yes. I don't know if I've ever done it, but that would be like, when you're laughing and you feel yourself about to cry.
I had a little tearful moment in Bucky fucking Dent, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we're going to try to make that as a movie one of these days. We've been trying for a while, and I do think it's a natural kind of a movie. It kind of lives in a very cliched, father-son baseball area, and yet I think if it's done correctly, it's not going to be cliched.
So, since you mentioned it, baseball was almost like a third central character in Bucky Dent. What's your relationship to baseball? Was that all kind of genuine? Did you grow up on baseball and have that type of relationship to the game? It feels to me like when someone's a baseball fan, you're going to get a lot more passion than your average football fan or basketball fan or maybe soccer fan, if that such a thing exists.
It's odd that way. My relationship to baseball is, I guess we dated when I was a kid. We dated pretty heavily when I was a kid. And then she broke up with me right around college. She didn't want me to play anymore. So I think I've always loved the game. I was a fan. I mean, not like a crazy fan. I find wearing the jersey of a grown man wearing the jersey of another man, I find it incomprehensible, that idea. So, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a fan, and when I was a kid, I was a fan. But there is something about baseball that just translates to literature in a way that it seems that other sports don't. Maybe it's just so slow, or who knows what it is. But the best sports writing seems to be about baseball and maybe boxing, but baseball. And I always like to say that you don't really have to know anything about baseball to enjoy Bucky Dent, and I guess I believe that's true, although I don't know what it would be like to not know anything about baseball, so I guess I'm just making that up.
I think you're right. Neither Rob nor I are sports fans really at all,
Right.
and I think we both have a basic understanding of how the games work and stuff,
Right.
and I think it played very well.
This is kind of more of a personal... in the podcast, I typically share personal stories that maybe have something to do with what we're talking about, and
Right.
often not, but I find them entertaining. So I'm going to tell you, baseball I've never really followed. However, I'll tell you how I got into reading as a kid. When I was in elementary school, the library that was in the town I grew up in had this thing where for kids reading in the summertime, if the kids read a certain number of books, they would get free tickets to a Cubs game. And that was like,
Right.
all right, of course we're going to read books. We read books anyway. And so me and my brother read so many books and got so many free Cubs tickets that they had to kind of cut us off.
Right.
And so we went to a bunch of, Cubs games, and goddamn, it worked because I never really cared about baseball, but that's, I think, how I became such a big reader. So
Wow. That's kind of a cool story.
kind of weird. It worked. They actually
Yes.
got me reading because of that, and I never,
Yeah.
they thought I was going to become a baseball fan and became a reader. So,
Well, they lost you.
yeah.
And you've never been back to a game since.
Cubs lost me. And all right, so I'll do a postscript to this. I was living about 5 blocks away from Wrigley Field up until a year before
Oh.
the
Yeah.
Cubs, went all the way.
Yeah.
And I was watching all the fanfare and everything, on the, when they won the World Series. And the only thought I had was, I'm so glad I don't live down there, because it was just chaos. It was so
A true fan.
true.
It's funny when
Go Cubs.
when I submitted Bucky to my editor, he's not a baseball guy at all. He's a great editor, but he said to me, it's just, I feel like, could we set it in the present day? Is there any way to, could we make it about the Cubs? And I was like, oh, you mean make it like fucking Bartman or something fucking Bartman? Or, that kid who caught who interfered with him. I was like, no, I can't do that. No, it's got to be Bucky. It's got to be 1978, and it's got to be Bucky fucking Dent.
That's great.
There's a very touching tribute towards the end of Bucky Dent, which I don't want to get too far into in the event that I don't want to spoil this for anybody. But my tears may have welled up a little bit in reading that. But then there was kind of a sadness there. So I felt like Marty, who the tribute is being made to without saying too much, that's what everybody identified him with, though, was just baseball. And I don't, I've known people like that in my life. That's the guy who's the Bears fan, or that's the guy who's the Cubs fan.
Right.
So there was inherent sadness in that, even though it was kind of like a celebration of his life.
Yeah.
Was that, I don't know, is that intentional, I guess, is what I'm trying to say? That kind of mix of, there's a tribute to this guy, but sadly the tribute is to his fandom to a baseball team.
I guess to me, it was the fact that it was a lie was the tribute. The fact that the celebration was as if the Red Sox had won, and not that the Yankees had beaten them yet again, and the love that was being expressed was, in the face of the hard truth of reality and death. Love was going to create a fiction that was going to carry the day, and if and if the book is about anything else besides, that life belongs to the losers or whatever you might pull from the book, it's really about that love is often in service of telling a story a certain way that is not factual, but is a comfort and more true somehow spiritually to the ones who are involved in it than the cold, hard facts of winning or losing.
And I'll have to say that with Bucky Dent, I know we're talking a lot about Bucky Dent, and we have questions about the other books.
That's okay.
With the Bucky fucking Dent book, in the beginning, I was thinking, okay, this is a strained father-son relationship, and I don't know why I didn't see it coming. But when we started to see the links that first off, Ted, but then like basically everybody would go to help out Marty feeling better about what he cared about, like
right.
It caught me off guard, but it was like I just get it. And then the rest of the book, I was just watching it pile on. So I think that emotional impact, once I got where it was going, was great.
Right. Thank you. I think.
I'm going to jump over to Miss Subways a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically, we did extensive online research about you before this interview. And by that, I mean, we went to Wikipedia. That's our standard joke.
That's good.
The doctoral thesis, if this is correct, is Magic and Technology in Contemporary Fiction and Poetry. Is that right?
Oh, boy. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But anyway, like the first thing I thought of was that probably applied a lot in the Miss Subways book, because there's definitely like that supernatural element, but also like kind of a time phone. So was this something that was in Miss Subways was inspired based on some of the research or writing that you did for that?
Yeah, possibly. Although I didn't actually ever write it, so I didn't. I just came up with the idea before I sat my orals, and then that was as far as I got. I might have started writing an introductory chapter, and then I got sidetracked, and now I'm 58, so it's not going to happen. But I think I was always interested in this idea. Now, the idea behind the thesis was this. It was, I was going to talk about certain authors, and they were Norman Mailer, James Merrill, Robertson Davies, Thomas Pynchon, and Ishmael Reed. And I was going to talk about how these authors of the 20th century were confronting these exponential gains in technology, and that technology is a certain kind of magic. I guess it's scientific magic. And in centuries gone by, you had a magician who did these things that technology now does. I mean, we're all fucking magicians now compared to, somebody in the 16th century. We'd rule. It's like Back to the Future. We go back, we invent rock and roll, we do. I got a toaster. I could be king of France just with a fucking toaster. I guarantee you send me back there with a toaster, and I'll do it. So my thesis was kind of about how in dealing with Oppenheimer, and nuclear weaponry, and the idea that there has never been a technology that hasn't been deployed. That's the cold hard fact of technology. It's like if we figure out how to do it, it just seems human nature that we are going to do it. We figured out how to make an A-bomb, we detonated it. We figured out how to make H-bombs, we detonated them. I imagine any bomb that we figure out how to do, we're going to detonate it. Whether or not we use it against people or atolls is another question. But therefore, there was a certain kind of lack of morality that was being brought to bear on the use of technology. Whereas magic was pretty much bifurcated into good magic and bad magic. There was bad magic. There was magic that you shouldn't be practicing. There was Dr. Faustus. There was a whole tradition of good magic and bad magic. But why is there not good technology and bad technology? And what I was saying was that these writers are trying to infuse a moral field of magic onto technology in order to moralize it, in order to make it a question to say, should we do that? I know we can, but should we? And that's kind of what my thesis was going to be about. Now, when Miss Subways comes along, I think it's just something I've always been interested in. I like the idea of gods as being technology superior beings, or magically superior beings, and humans kind of caught in the middle. So that's, I don't know if I answered the question, but I think, I talked around what I'm interested in.
You tend to be answering our questions way above, I think, where we're asking them. So I think you're good.
Should I stop doing that?
No, it's way better than I ever hoped for. So
okay.
Keep going.
All right. Okay. Well, that's where that came from, and I never did write the thesis, but I think, even if you go back to like stuff that I wrote for X-Files, which kind of perfectly lines up in that area. Well, the parrots, I think they're coming after me now. X-Files is kind of be a perfect canvas for somebody with my kind of interests to work at, because there's a lot of, what's the morality of this science happening in that show.
So we've touched on a little bit, I think, of kind of the maybe origins of Miss Subways and a little bit about Bucky Dent. Holy cow. Where did you come up with that? See, the other ones, like I've got like a good feel on where you came up with the idea and how you developed it. For anybody who does not know, Holy Cow is about a small group of animals who can communicate with one another, that find out what really happens to animals and decide to make a change for the better for themselves. How did this come to be?
Very, very simple. And I remember it very clearly, and it was a while ago. It was when I lived in L.A., and you spent a lot of time in your car, I find that driving can be a very creative act. The more creative it is, the worse driver you are, unfortunately. So, I would have, this kind of a spacing out that happens when you're driving. Paying attention but not. It's almost like swimming laps or running. And these are kind of good states of mind for me anyway, personally, to be in order for stuff to bubble up, just like ideas to bubble up. And so driving, I've always enjoyed driving in LA for that reason, is that I often have thoughts that seem to come out of nowhere that are interesting to me. Not often enough, but sometimes. And I was driving on Pacific Coast Highway, and it just fully formed into my head the thought. It was almost as if it was written on an index card. It said, I think it started, It's like, if I was a cow, I would probably try to get to India. And that's where the whole thing came from. It was just like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I wonder what the story there is, and then I just started to like tease the idea more. I was like, okay, well, what other animals might seek safe haven? Okay, well, a pig, if he could get to Israel because of the kosher laws, he'd be safe. Okay, so we got a pig, wants to go to Israel. And then the turkey, maybe he thinks that country's named after him, so that he'd be a god if he goes there. So now I got my 3 heroes, and I was like, oh, now I'm excited. I got 3 characters. I can maybe make a story about this. And when I was thinking about writing the first novel, I had the idea for Bucky. I even had the idea for Miss Subways back then in 2015. These were ideas that I'd toyed around with for years as screenplays or as just ideas that were in a drawer. And I knew I would write them up at some point. And it came time. I had time. I'd finished Californication. I had some time off. I was like, okay, I'm going to write that first novel. I think I chose Holy Cow because it was kind of like it took the pressure off of it, announcing myself as a writer of like serious adult fiction. I thought, okay, this is kind of perched somewhere in between for kids, for adults. It's kind of like you don't know what it is. I didn't know what it was. And in fact, it was difficult for me to sell it as an idea because publishers would say, well, is it for kids? Is it for adults? And I'd say, yep. And they don't like that. I mean, I'm not bad-mouthing them. Everybody needs to know how to market something. It's very difficult to market a book that is not for adults or for children. I had a similar experience when I made the movie House of D, which was it's a coming-of-age story for adults starring a kid, and that's a very difficult movie to sell because I didn't know that. I just was making a movie, but I didn't know it's hard to get adults to go see a movie about kids, and it's hard to get kids to go see a movie that's really for adults. So I kind of had the same experience with Holy Cow in the beginning until Jonathan Galassi at FSG said, I'd like to publish it.
Yeah, it was on our radar when it came out, and yeah, marketing, right? So we kind of passed on it. But I've got to tell you,
cow, that sounds stupid. I don't want to read a story about a cow.
I
was down for the cow. I want to tell you, I was down for the cow.
we always record this podcast in a way that we just, I don't know, like the only right way to do it is that the writer will never hear it.
Yeah.
But then sometimes you have to kind of face the music and know that someone heard it. Here's what I'll say about that. Although I enjoyed all three books, I enjoyed them very differently. And Holy Cow, I honestly don't remember the last time where I read a book with pretty much like a half smile on my face all the way through. So even if it was what might be considered
sounds like a grimace, though. It sure wasn't a grimace.
Yeah, well, especially if you've seen Livius. Good Lord.
Yeah. Rob knows me. It takes a lot for me to get a genuine full smile. But no, I mean, like, it was just a really good feel book to read. So maybe that's a prejudice that I have, and I have to open up my my world to books that may appear sillier. Because, like I said, I enjoyed all three of them differently. But if I really sat down and said, which one did I have the most fun reading? It's Holy Cow. So there you go.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to say that it's in the league of these kinds of books, but obviously Animal Farm is in that tradition, or even Charlotte's Web, which is a beautiful story, or for me, going back to like Aesop's Fables, I grew up with stories about animals, so it was kind of in me, just from me growing up. I loved Aesop's Fables growing up, so I kind of felt comfortable doing that, and I felt safe. I felt safe writing satirically in this form, writing through the animals, and like I said, as a first foray, as a first try at writing fiction, I chose it. I think, not specifically, but maybe unconsciously and smartly, to be able to hide in a way behind, this is just a book about a cow, and then I was really free to say what I meant.
Interestingly, and I don't know if this was intended, but you basically gave voice to the one element in that whole kind of question that you're asking that never has a voice. So it was, I don't know if you meant to be that deep about it, but yeah, we never hear from the animal's point of view on these topics, I guess.
Well, I mean, without getting too preachy, and I have a lot of problem with mixing politics and art and propaganda in general. Whether or not it's propaganda I fully believe in or not, I have a distaste for any kind of overt political agenda in any art. But certainly, I do believe in the consciousness of animals on this planet, and I do believe that we as a nation, it's a great disservice to our spiritual and psychic selves the way we treat animals and the way we harvest them on an industrial scale, and that was part of this. Now, I don't believe that a cow has the type of consciousness that the cow has in this book,
Mm-hmm.
but I do believe they have an animal consciousness, and I do believe that they feel pain and they feel love and they feel suffering, and I also believe that it's okay to eat them. I think that we have I think we are omnivores as humans, but the way, it was kind of written as a very oblique critique of industrial size meat farming that we do in this country.
Now that brings up. So I didn't have this question prepared, but you saying that made me think. Like, I guess after the book came out, how was it received? Did you have to answer really stupid questions about like animals can't fly or things, or did you have to kind of put the book in perspective for people that didn't understand it?
Well, I didn't want to get into the politics of it because I felt like I was writing an entertaining fable in a way, and that if you wanted to get an actual what can be done about this, that's a whole different discussion, and that's not necessarily the discussion that I'm seeking to have by writing this book. I really feel that books, they raise questions. They don't give it. And once you start giving answers, I don't think you're really not an artist anymore. You're some kind of politician. But the best question I got was when before the book came out, and it was getting translated into other languages, and I got a query from the German translator, who actually wrote a bestseller in Germany called "He's Back" about Hitler coming back to the present day. And it was a huge bestseller, a satire. And I was really happy that this guy was going to take the time to translate my book. And it was either him or his editor said basically that how could Elsie give milk if she hadn't had sex yet? If she hadn't had calves yet. I'm such a city boy that it never even occurred to me that I'd written this whole thing. So I was like, fuck.
And it all fell apart.
Oh my God. It all fell apart. And so at the end, I don't know if you read the addendum where I talk about how Elsie, can't be trusted, the stuff she told me. And that one of them is, how could she be giving milk if she claims to have been a virgin at that time?
So Elsie was outed as an unreliable narrator?
Exactly.
Wow.
I had to throw her under the bus. It was either her or me.
Well, a friend of ours once said that, the character can be wrong about something. It doesn't mean that the author is. So
I have taken refuge beneath that many a time, and I'm sure I will continue to.
That's the way to go.
I want to commend you on that was something that bothered me. That whole politics and art thing has bothered me for a while, and I was never able to really put it into words. And recently I read an article, maybe I was listening to a podcast, and I remember it was just stop ruining art by putting your politics into it. So I want to commend you for I think that's a great way to go.
Well, the politics is in it because you can't, politics is in art. You can't do something that's not political, really. The fact that it's not political even is political. Like, okay, here's my apolitical work of art. That's political. But if you have an agenda, if you're grinding an axe about a specific issue, or an agenda of specific issues, I couldn't commend your politics more if I agree with you, and I couldn't be more disappointed or unmoved by your work, because it just feels like a lecture.
Yeah.
And I feel like as a culture we're in a really tough place that way, because I feel like everything is being. It's not even like it used to be. You critique the author and then the book. It seemed like the beginnings of celebrity culture or whatever. Like, okay, it's all about the person, and now it's like all about the politics of that person and how it's being implemented through the artwork. And I'm an old fogey with this, and I'm just throwing up my hands and going, it's all propaganda. You know, even if I agree, it's still propaganda.
It's like it's filtered through a cause. Like it can't just be what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's that, and the cause is great, and maybe the movie's great, maybe the book is great, but there's still something that gets to me as a consumer of these things, as a reader, as a watcher, where you talk about unreliable narrator. I feel that's an unreliable artist who's trying to convince me of a political position of some kind.
I had a question, and it's not going to fit well, so I don't know if I want to ask it or not. But something came up earlier, and it's in my brain. You were talking about like when you were in the car, and I'm sorry to switch lanes on you here, talking about cars, and being creative in the car, and your music. You've got the 2 albums. You've got Every Third Thought, and then Hell or High Water. And the Hell or High Water one just reminded me of one of those car thoughts. And I'm sorry that I'm just subjecting you to my thoughts and stuff like that.
All right.
I was thinking about the Hell or High Water thing recently, and maybe you have insight into this. I always looked at this as like, all right, hell, like, so this is come Hell or High Water means like obviously the bad things are going to happen, whatever. Right. High water doesn't seem nearly as severe as hell.
Right.
And that was kind of a car thought I had one time, and so,
yes, I'll take high water, please.
Yeah, like
you can keep the hell for yourself.
If it's a choice between the two, I'm really thinking high water.
Like,
you move inland.
It's like
the
old Eddie Izzard routine with English torturers. You remember that?
The cake or death, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cake, please. Cake, please.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're out of cake.
Yeah, we only had 3 bits, and I didn't know there was going to be such a rush.
Cake or death?
Obviously, I'm not making light of your art, but it triggered a thought in my head.
Well, I think the saying is older. You know, I think it's an old saying, and I think it comes from a time when high water was a big deal. You know, you're talking about flood. You know, I think it's really
Sure.
hell or you know, tsunami type floodings.
Right.
You know, so it's not just you know, high tide or whatever. Although high tide can be tough, but it's I just always loved. I guess I loved the phrase when I was writing the song. And it struck me as kind of sadly funny to write the line, "I said I'd love you, come hell or high water." Well, the flood's in. You know, so
yeah.
To me that was a good way into a lyric. So that's where that all comes from.
That's great. No, I love it.
Yeah.
So while we're on the music, it seems like you've got acting down. You've nailed the literary stuff, and now to be a true Renaissance man, right? We had to move into music.
Yeah.
How, like, I don't want to know like how you came to that decision. I guess, was it a tough decision to make to try your hand at music?
That's an interesting question, because I would never have done it if I hadn't been pushed almost every step of the way with the music. Because honestly, throughout my life, if you would have asked me what's my greatest fear, it would be having to sing alone in public, in front of anybody, really. I mean, I was in, you know, church school where you sing hymns, and, you know, I was one of the kids who was told to, you know, just lip sync, David, just move your lips. So it was never, there's never been a point in my life where somebody goes, "You should sing." And so, yeah, it would have been. It's so absurd to me that not only that I record myself singing, but that I do it live where I'm not protected. So it's a wonderful absurdity in my life. It's like one of these things that I think about, and I just go, it's just goes to show that you don't know anything at all about what's going to happen in your life. So I started playing guitar like 6 or 7 years ago, something to do with Californication, and then I started going, well, I can get free lessons if I have Hank playing guitar. So I started getting free lessons.
That's clever.
And and cheap. You know, it helps to be half Scottish sometimes. You can figure these things out. And I started playing guitar. It was really just to amuse myself. And then I started playing, you know, looking up on the internet, and you know, anybody can find the music for these songs that I grew up loving, and they're rock and roll, so they're pretty simple. And I was just amazed at how simple they were, not in the sense of easy, but they were simple. And I was surprised to find that I would put chords together and I would hear melodies that maybe I couldn't sing so well, but I could hear them. And if I brought them to a friend of mine who was a really good singer and guitar player, then he could pad out the melodies for me in ways that I heard them in my head but couldn't reproduce them. And then once I heard him do them, then I could kind of copy it. And then I just started singing better that way. And then I met this guy, Brad Davidson, who said, hey, you know, I really think these songs, you know, I started writing songs, and he said, I think these songs are legit, and, you know, if you want to work on your voice, if you really want to work on that, then I think you should, you know, we should record some of them. So I was like, okay, I'll do that, but, you know, you use auto-tune, and I will never perform live, so let's just do this, and you can just I can sound like Cher on that song, or I can sound, you know, like Kanye. Just auto-tune the fuck out of me and make me sound amazing, and then I will be like Steely Dan, and I will never hit the road, and you'll just think that I can sing. And so that's not how we recorded. Ultimately, we recorded it. I mean, I'm sure I'm tuned a little bit, but I'm not tuned a lot, and I do perform live, and I'm not tuned there, and I hit the wrong notes sometimes, and I go flat and I go sharp, but that's rock and roll, and that's live performance, and I'm perfectly okay with that at this point. I mean, I always want to sing better. I always want to sing like Sting. You know, I always want to be pitch perfect, but it ain't ever going to happen.
So I guess knowing that you have, like, you know, kind of a vast body of work outside of music, do you find you get something different out of it than when you're writing or when you're acting and stuff? Like, does it give you a different charge?
Definitely. It's really collaborative, which I love. From a very selfish point of view, I get to have really talented people add their talents to me and make me look better than I am. But also, just from a human standpoint, I love collaborating. I love playing a game. I love, you know, team sports. That's one of the things I love about acting is, you know, you go to work with a lot of people and you create this thing and everybody's involved. And acting itself is very much like a back and forth, a catch or a tennis game or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I like that. And music. And I found that lyric writing was a way to kind of get back to poetry writing, which was the first kind of writing that I did, like in high school. I guess I wrote poems, even in college. And it's not the same. Lyrics are not poems, but they're more they're closer to poems than prose or to screenwriting. So I did, and I find it very interesting, fun. It's really fulfilling for me to try to write lyrics because I kind of it's totally new because it's not quite poetry, but it's something else.
Yeah.
The and I can't think of his name right now, but the airborne toxic event, the story of the guy that started. Yes, his backstory is kind of interesting. He had a lot of bad things happen to him all in the course of like a year, and he started to write what he thought was poetry. Then he showed it to someone and said, "This isn't poetry. This is song lyrics. We should get you some musicians and see if we can make this happen." So it's interesting that you say that they're that close, but they're really not the same thing.
No, it's a wonderful. I didn't know Don DeLillo has a band.
Yeah, is that the guy's
Really?
name? The Airborne Toxic Event?
Oh, that's the name of the band.
Yes. Sorry.
Oh, I thought you meant Don DeLillo was writing, because
No.
in one of his books, there's an Airborne Toxic Event. I thought.
Oh no, yeah. There's a band, and it might be based on his book.
Oh
Maybe,
yeah,
I
it
don't
probably
know.
is.
Yep.
Yeah, it probably is. But yeah, it's a magical kind of relationship between the words and the music, because I think we've all had that experience of reading lyrics on a page and being underwhelmed, and then you hear it embedded in the song, and you're like, oh my God, that is so perfect and moving. And what happened? What happened? What happened?
Yeah.
Between that, and lyrics have to give the music room, and the music has to give the lyric room, and it's a real relationship, and that, to me, that's like the exciting thing about songwriting is figuring that out, and if you're lucky or good or both, you watch it happen and you feel it when it starts to happen, and that's cool.
Well, it's a perspective I don't really think I had before, but it makes a lot of sense now that you say that.
Well, I mean, you even look at like the great lyricists like Dylan or Leonard Cohen or the Beatles,
Mm-hmm.
or Warren Zevon, and you look at their stuff on the page, and it's kind of flat. It doesn't stand up to the best poetry, which is why it was weird for me to see Bob Dylan win a Nobel Prize for, I guess it was poetry, because I don't think his words, they don't stand up to the best poems, because they're not made to. That wasn't his intent.
Mm-hmm.
His words had to exist with the music.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was kind of bogus. He's the best lyricist of all time.
Sure, I will heartedly agree with that.
But I don't think those are the best poems of all time. They're the best lyrics of all time. Maybe I'm just nitpicking. I'm not sure what I'm saying.
You're gonna get the Nobel Committee on the phone and be like, "Listen, guys."
I have had the opportunity to obviously see my own playlist and some of Rob's playlists, so I can tell you neither one of us has any right to comment on music at all. The one thought and I guess question I had in listening to both of your albums, it seemed that from the first one, From Hell or High Water, to Every Third Thought, that two things struck me. One, and I could be completely wrong here. One, that the newer album, Every Third Thought, is a little more upbeat than Hell or High Water, and that you sound more like yourself. So having watched X-Files in its entirety and Californication its entirety, I have that voice in my head, and that you sounded more like yourself in Every Third Thought. So were there any conscious decisions, A, to be more upbeat, or did something change in your life, and B, did someone tell you didn't sound enough like you on that first album?
Good question. And I think it has an answer. I hope I can give it to you. I think Hell or High Water is really a divorce album. It's really an end of a relationship album, and most of the songs are about the end of something. So it is. There's a certain down to it, written into the material. Written lyrically, anyway. Doesn't depend on what the tempo is. I mean, it's just like most of the songs are. I don't want to say dark, but there's a lot of pain, and I think there's a lot of pain in Every Third Thought. But there's also some more hopeful or more new beginning songs in that as well. So in terms of my voice, I just think I got more comfortable. And I get better as a singer. I mean, I get more relaxed. I get more willing to take some chances, or to expand my range a little bit, or to really sing out. So when I recorded Hell or High Water, I was terrified and terribly embarrassed to be singing at all. I really thought I had no business to be singing, and I'm sure you'd have some people that will agree with that. So it's like I just, it was everything I could do to get through that and to try to sing the melodies that I had written in a way that worked. But by the time it came to record Every Third Thought, I had not only done Hell or High Water, but I'd also toured some and sung live and gone through the experience of having to sing in that moment and, not being corrected and not being taken care of by a machine. So, having been through all that and to survive, and not only survive, but kind of feel invigorated and exhilarated by that connection of just the singing with my own particular voice. That would be, if you're hearing that in Every Third Thought, I mean, that's the way I would describe my experience of my recording so far. I mean, the first day that we recorded Hell or High Water, we were recording a song that didn't ultimately make it on the album called Stay on the Train. And, at some point after about 4 hours into it, I was actually lying on the floor of the studio just repeating, "This is a mistake, this is a huge mistake, this is a mistake." And I had to walked around the building and given a drink and get back in there, and then it got better from there.
It's fascinating that that you're and forgive me in advance if I say this in a really poor way, but that your confidence in a performance can be shook, even though the fanboys of the world would be like, "Oh, you're fucking Mulder, you can do this," but it has nothing to do with this other medium,
No.
and so you're kind of starting fresh in another medium, and so we've
it's not only that. It's not only that. It's as an actor, I've had, when you're starting a new role, you have days in the beginning. Hopefully, they get fewer and farther between, but you have days where you are just lost, and you're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm terrible. I'm not here. I'm not present. I'm not listening. Nothing. Nothing is real. I'm full of shit. I'm phony. I can see the words on the page as my mouth is moving. I can, all these things. So it's that's, on the other hand, you could say that's what makes it so exciting in a way. It's if I was going into everything going, I'm older, I can do this, or I've done this, therefore I can do that. That, it might be soothing in a way, but it's not that. It's not really human.
You don't get that thrill of accomplishment.
Oh man, it's great. To go through a day, and I've had many of these days on all different kinds of acting jobs. A day where I am completely lost and unsure and insecure, and to keep going and to actually get to a point where you do some decent work. Oh man, those are the best days. I go home and I'm like, I'm a hero. Today I was a hero. Today I was a fucking hero.
Oh, trust us. We've interviewed hundreds of authors, and it was intimidating to talk to you. So I feel like we know what that's like a little bit,
right.
At least.
I had in a nutshell, and this is not totally on point, but it speaks a little to what I'm trying to say. Is when I was shooting. I was shooting a movie in Montreal, and I think it's the one movie I've done that actually never came out, and it was called The Secret, and it was a great idea. It was a remake of a Japanese movie and a novel, Japanese novel, and it was a cool kind of thriller idea. But anyway, for whatever reason, the movie didn't ultimately work. But my movie House of D came out maybe the second week we were shooting that, and my driver was a Quebecois guy, and he didn't speak much English, but he saw that my movie had been reviewed in the local paper. House of D had been reviewed, so he very kindly opened it up on my seat from when I was getting in to go to work that morning, And I don't think he saw, he didn't see what was written, or else he probably wouldn't have done that. So I get into the car, and the first line is, House of D gets an F.
Oh,
and
no.
I'm like, what the fuck? And then the first line is, has somebody abducted David Duchovny's brains?
Oh, Jesus.
And like my stomach is just dropping. I'm like sweating, cold sweat. So I go to my trailer, and I'm completely, that feeling when you're just out of your body. You've been like kicked out of your body,
Yeah.
and you're so uncomfortable that you're just like jittering somewhere 3 feet outside of your body. And I'm just thinking, what am I going to do with this? What can I do? I mean, I gotta. And then I was like, well, I got to go to work today. I got to go act now. These people are paying me. They're making their movie. They've hired me to do good work on their movie, not to wallow in self-pity or whatever it is I'm doing here. So I've got to go and do good work today. I got to suck it up somehow and go do good work. And then, like that day, I got home and I was like, David, you're a good person. You really showed up for the other guy. You could have just given up. And then the next morning, that was a Friday, as I recall, because movies come out on weekends. And then Saturday, I woke up, and I was so happy. And I was like, why are you so happy? And then I realized that I'd lived my entire life in fear of getting an F, and that I'd gotten an F from this really unfair, I think, reviewer. And it didn't kill me. Like, I still woke up on Saturday. So I was like, oh, an F doesn't kill you, after all. You get to move on. So I was like, oh.
You overcame the F.
I was like, thank you for the F. Like, if it had been a D, I wouldn't have had the same reaction. Because, like, well, a D, I mean, it's not an F. By the way, there's no way that movie's an F. Like an F is like an incompetent, like an Ed Wood movie is an F. So it's like, fuck whoever you are who reviewed that movie. 'Cause that deserved a D. Don't give me an F.
Wow.
All right, here's the hard-hitting question. I'm only going to preface
that review. I was like, well, here we have that review.
We're just gonna read it word for word. No,
yeah,
we're
going
not
to bring
prepared.
on the reviewer now, who has some questions of his own. No,
Yeah.
Rob and I have had this argument discussion for years, for literally years now. So I'm not going to preface the question. I'm hoping that you'll just be able to pick from the two choices with an answer. Hank Moody or Fox Mulder?
Well, what's the occasion?
I don't know if there could have been a better answer than that, to be honest. My secret answer was Denise from Twin Peaks.
Yeah. Well, Denise is like so much potential. Like there's so much Mulder. There's hundreds of hours, and there's a lot of Moody. Mm-hmm. But there's only a little bit of Denise, and you just really want more.
That's part of the appeal, I think. That's definitely part of the appeal.
I know. I don't think we'll ever get it.
But honestly, and I'm not going to go deep into this, but in the Twin Peaks return season, I love the entire thing. One of the things that I was looking most forward to was an appearance from Denise and the exchange between Denise and Gordon Cole about I can't remember exactly what he says. Something about like fix your hearts or go and die. Man, that just knocked me dead.
Such a great line.
Oh,
such a great line. When I read that, and I only got 2.5 pages. I got the scene. That's all I got. And I was shooting Aquarius at the time. And so I went down on a Saturday night because I worked Monday through Friday. And I mean, I would have worked 100 Saturdays in a row for David Lynch. But, this is all I had. And so, I'm playing this LA cop, and now I'm going to go play. I'm riding down to downtown LA, with this script that they sent me maybe a couple days before. And when I read that line, I was like, that is such a great line.
My God.
Those clowns, something out of those clown cars. I told them they better fix their hearts or die, and I was like, wow. And then I was really happy that I was going to get to work with David, because he didn't direct me when we when I did the show way back when. And I don't believe I really ever had met him. And so I not only got to be directed by him, that I got to act in the scene with him. So that was, I was sad that that was all. That I totally understand. Denise is a peripheral character to the whole story, but I was happy that I got to meet and work with David in that way, and I'm such an admirer of his. He's just he's like a world unto himself, and I think it's so rare.
But yeah, it's got to be cool, especially not knowing that you hadn't really worked with him much on the original series, like being able to just like that moment you have with him to do a scene with him, but then he goes and steals it with that great fucking line. What a jerk.
That's okay. I'm fine with that. I mean, he did give me like the little moment after he leaves. I kind of fanned myself. He kind of kept that in, which was nice. But I mean, the circumstance, it's crazy. That I kind of woke up. I'd worked all night Friday. I wake up Saturday afternoon. I head downtown L.A. I go into makeup. I come out looking like Denise at like 3:30 in the morning. We start shooting. I meet David Lynch and we shoot. And it was just like, that was a cool day for me.
Sure. Absolutely. So what, I guess originally we were going to say what book can we look forward to next, because this is a book podcast, but like what from David Duchovny are we going to be seeing on the horizon soon?
Well, I do have a book that I haven't started writing yet, but I'm in the research mode, and it's kind of for me it's more of a sprawling kind of epic, American big landscape novel. So it's very different for me, and I'm terrified to try it. And I got a lot of story to tell, and I think it's an interesting story. And I'm waiting for some of the research to come in, and I think that's going to lead me in directions that are even more interesting. And I think I think it's going to be good. I can only hope that it's going to be good, and I'm eager to start. And I'm going to record some acoustic versions of my songs, maybe like a little six-pack of acoustic versions of songs from Hell or High Water and Every Third Thought. And then I've got a bunch of new songs that I want to record in the spring for another album. And then I've got a couple of TV shows that are like at different stages of development, but are starting to come into focus that I'd be acting in, not writing. And I want to direct Bucky Dent. So there's a lot of nothing, but also a lot of something.
Awesome.
Is there anything on your radar you want to recommend for us or for listeners to check out?
No, I'm not. I read a lot, but the people that I would recommend don't need the recommendation. They're really good. There's nobody that I'm going to discover for you that I'm some hidden jewel that I know about. I mean, like I went to see Portugal the Man the other day, and I'm like, hey, that's a great band. But I'm sure everybody knows that already.
Well, definitely want to thank you for taking some time to talk to us about. I mean, I think we probably just like got the tip of the iceberg, and I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours and hours. But thank you so much for joining us, and it was a real pleasure talking to you.
It was my pleasure, and I would love to, if I ever do finish the next book, or if you just want me to come on without a book, next time the TV or movie happens, we'll do that too, if you want.
And there you have it. That was David Duchovny, dude. That was a pretty excellent interview.
Yeah, he makes podcasting look easy, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, he did all the heavy lifting in that one, I'll be honest. So, at any rate, thanks for listening. A huge thank you to David Duchovny for joining us, and we'll be back again in about a week or so. Until then, I'm Livius Nedden.
And I'm Rob Olson. Keep reading.